The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. My name is Joni Siegel, and I'm the host for this podcast. My husband, Steve Siegel, is the producer for the podcast. Today's episode is episode number 246. And just a reminder to please subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and also check out our YouTube channel. Pretty much since the beginning of 2020, all of our podcasts are also visual. They're also video recorded, and that's on our YouTube channel by the same name, the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. If you have a story to share with us, please go to our website, the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. Just the addictionpodcast.com, and reach out to us, and we would love to hear your story. Today we have an interview with a gentleman named Leigh Steinberg. Leigh is probably most known as an American sports agent, but he is also a philanthropist and an author. He has represented over 300 professional athletes in football, baseball, basketball, boxing, and Olympic sports. He has represented the number one overall pick in the NFL draft a record 8 times. He's often credited as the real-life inspiration of the sports agent from Cameron Crowe's film Jerry Maguire in 1996. He's also a philanthropist, and I want to hear him tell us a lot more about that. So let's talk to Leigh Steinberg. Leigh Steinberg, thank you so much for being willing to be on the podcast today and telling us your story.
My pleasure.
I know you're a busy dude. So, take us back to the beginning. Tell us a little bit about you, where you grew up. I know that you had problems with alcohol, and how did that all come about?
A lot later in life, and we actually didn't have alcohol in our house when I was growing up. I never saw either of my parents take a drink. We don't have it as a genetic marker. I grew up in West Los Angeles to a father who was a high school principal in the LA City schools, and a mother who was a librarian. And my father's chief avocation was being president of the Los Angeles City Human Relations Commission. So I was brought up with 2 core values. One was treasure relationships, especially family. And the second was try to make a meaningful difference in the world and help people who can't help themselves. So I was hardwired to change the world for the better.
Wow,
and
I like that. I like to hear that. That's awesome, Leigh. Sorry, go ahead.
So I went to Hamilton High in West Los Angeles, and then a year to UCLA, and then it was the late 60s, and the vortex of all student activity was Berkeley. And it was a time where people were having their hair longer and wearing tie-dye and work shirts and sexual liberation and rock music and alternative herbal substances. And the big fight was against the war in Vietnam. And so I ended up student body president when Ronald Reagan was governor, and he and I used to duke it out. And so I learned everything I needed to learn about negotiating from Governor Reagan. And I was a dorm counselor in an undergraduate dorm, and they moved the freshman football team into the dorm. And one of the students was the quarterback on the team, and his name was Steve Bartkowski. And in 1975, he was the first player selected overall in the NFL draft. And at that point, there really wasn't organized sports agentry. A team could hang up the phone and say, we don't deal with agents. And but we got the largest rookie contract in NFL history.
Wow.
And so I was going to do something in politics or some form of civil liberties or civil rights law, or get some court experience with the Alameda County DA. But this altered all of that. And when we arrived in Atlanta, I saw that there were Klieg lights in the sky to sign the contract for Bartkowski the next day. And there was a huge crowd pressed up against the police line. It looked like a movie premiere. And the first thing we heard was, we interrupt the Johnny Carson show to bring you a special news bulletin. Steve Bartkowski and his attorney have just arrived. We switch you live for an in-depth interview. So I realized I was in another world when it came to sports. And I saw that the athletes were the movie stars and celebrities. And I thought, well, this could be a profession where if I have them retrace their roots to the high school community and set up a scholarship fund or work for a church or Boys and Girls Club, and then go to the collegiate institution where someone like Troy Aikman endowed a full scholarship at UCLA or Edgar and James at the University of Miami. And then at the pro level, set up a charitable foundation where they would take some cause in their own life and put together a advisory board with the leading political figures, community leaders, and business leaders to execute a program. So that's where Warwick Dunn, retired running back, just put the 175th single mother and their family into the first home they'll ever own by making the down payment and moving into it. So that's how it began.
Wow. So I know pretty much, I mean, we're in Tampa, Florida, so we're Bucks fans. And I know that when we go to the game, it's like every player has a charity. So you were kind of almost like the spearhead of that to get these guys giving back.
Well, so Warwick Dunn played for the Buccaneers.
Yeah.
And had a safety, John Lynch, who played for the Buccaneers. Both of them established way back. Steve Young played for the Buccaneers. And currently I have a running back, Ronald Jones, who has a big charity back at his high school who plays for the Bucks.
Wow. That's awesome. That's just awesome that you did that.
So that's basically been it. And it's also messaging. It's understanding that athletes can trigger imitative behavior, especially in rebellious adolescents. So when I represented the heavyweight champion, Lennox Lewis in boxing, we had him do a public service announcement that said, "Real men don't hit women."
Wow.
And that could do more for domestic violence education for young kids than 1,000 authority figures ever could.
Yep. I mean, athletes are heroes. And so what they say is listened to. That's awesome. So you were an attorney.
Yes, I am an attorney.
You are an attorney.
It's a specialized, it's sports law. So if I negotiate contracts for playing or contracts for endorsements, it's just a different type of client.
Understood. Okay, so that was kind of your whole game. And then how did you then end up with a problem with alcohol? How did that happen? How did that come about?
So I was one beer Steinberg early in life, and I used to be able to drink a beer and not get through the whole thing and push it back. But I lived in a world that was awash in alcohol. So that in pro sports, there are banquets, there are all sorts of activities that revolve around drinking. But still, it wasn't a problem. In the late 90s, early 2000s, a series of events happened in my personal life. So my kids were diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, which is an eye disease leading to total blindness, and there's no cure. I lost my father on a long death to cancer, and he was sort of the rock in my life. We lost a home. We live in a beach community here in Newport Beach to mold that infested our home, and we had to knock it to the ground. And then I started to experience problems in my marriage, and nothing in work ever destabilized me. I knew coming into the office every day that there would be, notwithstanding great preparation, that there would be aberrational events that would occur that would knock it off. That's just part of business. But I felt like Gulliver tethered down on the beach by Lilliputians because I couldn't do anything to save my father and save my kids from blindness and provide a home. And I know it was grandiosity to think I could, but I'd always felt like as long as I had a chance to problem solve, I didn't have to have it work all the time, but at least I had a chance, and this wasn't happening. So I started out drinking late at night, and then when I broke up with my wife, I found a very stunning thing because I moved into my first apartment, and I found out it was legal to consume alcohol while it was light outside. And late at night, I couldn't build up much of an alcohol level, but now that I was depressed and untethered, and I found out you can drink during the day, and it did allow me to get high levels going. And it snuck up on me. I didn't really understand alcoholism. I didn't know that my brain had fundamentally changed so that I became allergic to alcohol, and it became never safe to do it. And eventually, I realized I had a problem, and I closed down my office and gave my practice to the younger agents. I closed down my condo, and I went back to my parents' house in West Los Angeles, and I was sitting on my father's bed, and my only thought in my mind was where I could find more vodka. And my life had been reduced to that. And at a certain moment, I had an epiphany and a sense of proportionality, that I wasn't a starving peasant in Sudan, that I didn't have the last name Steinberg in the 30s in Nazi Germany, that I wasn't sick in any fundamental way that was not self-induced. And what excuse did I have to not live up to my father's goals? So I went into sober living. I worked a 12-step program. I got a sponsor. I surrendered to the concept that I was powerless over the effect that alcohol had, and I couldn't ever drink safely again. And I surrounded myself with a unique fellowship. And I had a world of detritus and destruction. So I owed like $4.9 million. Wow. I didn't have a practice. I was not certified any longer to be an agent. I let my certification draft. And so there was this massive hill that was necessary to climb. And I think it's Sophocles, or one of the Greek gods, pushes a boulder up a hill.
Yep.
And every time you think that you pushed it and you've gained some traction, it rolls back on you. So that it wasn't a straight shot, but, and that was, then I had to reform a business. I had frayed my relationship, especially with my middle child, and I had to reconstruct that. And but in 2013, I got refunded to set up a new sports and entertainment agency, and ended up in last year doing the biggest sports contract of all time for a player named Patrick Mahomes. And eventually things got better. And I've done a whole series of health treatments, from hyperbaric oxygen to light stem to a process called RTMS, because I inherently knew that that had to have done some damage to my body. And so I faced it, got a brain spec, did all the things I could do to speed up the regenerative healing process. And I'm now rolling along in my 11th year.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com, or call us at 727-314-7080. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star review. Sometimes, the hardest thing about getting someone into recovery is getting them to agree to treatment. Bobby Newman, a certified drug counselor with 30 years experience and an over 85% success rate as an interventionist, has created a series of 12 videos that you can use right now to learn every step to get your loved one to agree to treatment. Call 1-833-918-0008 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby.
Ryan Schwab is a Florida native who grew up in Palm Beach County. He never had a father figure for guidance, so he joined the School of Hard Knocks, spending most of his life in the streets. As happens with so many young people, he was then introduced to alcohol and drugs. He lost his self-respect, became a slave to drugs, went through multiple treatments, detoxes, incarcerations, and pure hell. Now clean and sober, 5 years later, Ryan gives hope to others through his podcast, Life Lessons and Struggles Over Coffee. Please subscribe to his podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcast. Now, I am assuming that when you did the 12-step program, you just quit drinking cold turkey, right?
Oh, from the moment in March 21st, 2010 was my sobriety date. And since then, I haven't used alcohol.
Wow. But the reason I bring that up is because we know from a lot of the interviews that we've done that sometimes detoxing off of alcohol can be deadly. I mean, people can die. So the fact that you were able to do it, wow.
So I'm in the Guinness Book of Records for the most relapse prior to 2010. Okay. There's probably a statute that says the most relapse. But when I would come down off of alcohol, I didn't go through any of the horror show that I saw other people do. It's just a matter of chemistry. And one of the problems was that I never got heavily hung over because I don't love pain. And if I had only gotten hung over after a binge, I didn't feel 100%, but I didn't have the splitting headache and all the rest of it. I never had the shakes. It's just, I could have, I was just lucky.
Yep. Well, very, very well done on all the years of sobriety. I know it's not easy. There's a gentleman that I follow on Instagram who is in recovery, and every day he says it's day 490. Now it's day 491. So I know that it can be like that. And you said you used to measure it in days, but now you can measure it in years, which is very cool.
Yeah, I went from days and then months. And look, I don't think anybody would ever be able to rehabilitate themselves if the cravings didn't leave. And so that first part, well, it's sort of like at the first you go through a pink cloud where everything's great because you don't have alcohol. Then you get to the point where the cravings are there. And so you have to deal with that, because what alcohol did to my brain was something where it took away the prefrontal lobe judgment. And so I might sit in front of my condo and say, tonight, I'm not going to drink. And magically, 15 minutes later, I had driven to the liquor store and I had a big bottle of vodka. Now, how did that happen? I was sitting there saying, I'm not going to drink. And so at a certain level, it goes to the amygdala in the back of your brain, which is responsible for all autonomic events, right? You don't need somebody to tell you you have to go to the bathroom or you have to breathe,
right.
or a whole series of actions. And alcohol became like that for me. My brain conflated the need for alcohol with breath itself.
Wow. Interesting. But you conquered it, and you're here today. Now,
well, what I am, Joni, is I'm a bun in the oven, and I'm just cooking.
okay. And we usually say that about babies and pregnant women, okay?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I'm a bun in the oven, and I've got a temporary respite from all that based on my spiritual condition.
Yep.
And, but I look at the guys with much more time sort of as professors. And when I went off to sober living and to meetings, all I did was listen to the hope and experience of those people.
That's awesome. And just by telling us your story, you're giving hope to other people. So thank you for doing that.
Well, so if someone is out there depressed, destabilized, and starting to get hopeless because of an addiction to alcohol, just know there's help available. And I went to the bottom depths, and things are better now, and it can be better for you too.
That's awesome. I mean, that's a perfect message. It's right before Christmas, so that's a perfect message to give people. Even though you may celebrate Hanukkah and not Christmas, it's a good.
We celebrate both.
Yeah.
Christmaka.
Yeah. Say that again.
Christmaka.
Christmaka. Okay. I think we do that too because Steve was raised in the Jewish faith and I was raised as a Protestant. So yeah, Christmaka. Okay, that's what we celebrate.
My kids were the luckiest kids in the world. They got 8 nights of Hanukkah, and then they got stockings and Christmas presents.
I love it. Well, you gave us a great message for everybody. Leigh, talk just a little bit about some of the philanthropy that you do currently, and then I will let you go.
So in the NFL, we've got probably the most talented player, Patrick Mahomes, quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs. We have another quarterback for the Miami Dolphins, whose name is Tua Tagovailoa. We have a quarterback for the Washington Redskins named Taylor Heineke, who starts for them. We have the starting running back for the Rams named Darrell Henderson. We've got just a whole variety of players. I mean, over time, I now have 12 players in football in the Hall of Fame, but I had a big baseball practice, big basketball practice. I did heavyweight champs like Lennox Lewis and Oscar De La Hoya. In baseball, we have a number of Hall of Fame players. So it's been all of that. But
and do they all do charity? Do they all have their own foundations?
So in that initial meeting that I would have with them, I talk out their ability to leave a legacy. And the enemy, Joni, of athletes is self-absorption. Mm-hmm. Well, enough about me. Can we talk about how you feel about me? That's self-absorption. And so what we're trying to do is to prepare them for second career and prepare an athlete for to be a citizen in the world. And so these programs help them achieve that because they see themselves in a larger way. So one of the first things I'll say to an athlete is, if you broke your leg tomorrow or you could no longer play, what other skills do you have? So 3 of my former players actually own parts of NFL football teams. Uh-huh. Others of them are big successes in hedge funds or own businesses, some of them in broadcast. But ultimately, my job's not done until they're successfully ensconced in a second career.
I think that's awesome. And I wonder, just kind of thinking here, if that helps the athletes that you represent maybe have a lower risk of developing some sort of substance abuse because they have other purpose in their life than just playing the sport. Because we know from a couple of the athletes that we talked to, Randy Grimes, former Buccaneer especially, where, he said painkillers are, kind of like part of the job description. And, there was a situation where he became a full-on addict. And then when he could no longer play, that was what he did. Now, of course, he has pro athletes in recovery and has a whole other dimension to his life. But I'm wondering if you instilling that in these athletes at the get-go helps them maybe be less likely to become addicted to drugs.
That's our hope. Now,
yeah.
The use of opiates as painkillers. Let's take a game like football. It's a traffic accident on every play.
Yep.
And I've had players who, like Randy, became addicted in the hospital, came out, addicted to Vicodin or hillbilly heroin.
Uh-huh.
And so that, that's been difficult. But they do have progressive drug and alcohol programs. And part of the problem post-career is lack of structure. Mm-hmm. So athletes thrive on structure. They know what they're doing every day. They know when they're working out. They know when they're practicing. They know when to get on a plane. They have itineraries that lay everything out for them. And all of a sudden they retire and the structure's gone. And so what we're trying to do is provide structure in second career so that they're not disoriented.
I think that's awesome. I think everything you're doing is awesome, Leigh. And I think that your story of recovery is one that will give people hope. As you said, there's hope available. And if Leigh can do it the way he did it, you can do it too.
And even though I have had continuous sobriety for the last 11 years plus, there was a period where I kept relapsing. And so the other part of this is don't give up. Life will push you back, but the question is, can you be resilient? Can you, in the midst of negative consequences, can you visualize a better future? I'm just the sort of person who, if there's a barn filled with defecation, pony poop, thinks there's a pony in there somewhere. So you've got to have that vision that there's light at the end of the tunnel.
That's huge. Leigh, thank you so much for talking to us today.
My pleasure.
A couple books. I'm going to put up your book covers because that might be inspirational to people. But I just really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today because it's a great story. You're a great speaker.
Yeah, keep up the good work you're doing because the Addiction Podcast can help people change their lives.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. It's the 23rd of December. In 2 days, it's Christmas. And our wish for you is that you or your loved ones are clean and sober, and that 2022 is a completely different year for you and yours. If you've lost someone to addiction, our heartfelt sorrow goes out for you, and our love and our care for you. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back again next week.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information, reach out to us on Facebook or go to www.theaddictionpodcast.com. Our email is theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com.